Well, Lonnie, it's great to have a chance and sit down and talk with you. You are the Associate Director for First Year Writing here at CU. And unfortunately, you were one of many that lost almost everything in the Marshall fires, which impacted a huge area outside of Denver earlier in 2022. Before we get too far into that, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your family?
Sure. So a little bit about myself. Yes, I'm the Associate Director for First Year Writing here. I've been here since the fall of 2005. And so I'm married and we have 2 sons. Our oldest son is in college, not at CU Boulder. Don't know what he was thinking. And then our youngest son graduates from high school in about a month. And we lived in the home where that burned for about 16 years. My research here focuses on first year writing, but also integrating themes of well-being into writing, as well as science writing and science in mainstream media.
Very cool. Thank you. So tell us a bit about your experience when the fire started. Were you all at home? How did you hear about the evacuation notice? How did you hear about the fires themselves?
Yeah, so it was December 30th. So how we heard about the fire, well, really, we sort of saw things happening at first. It was over the holidays. And so I was sitting at a table doing a jigsaw puzzle with a window behind me, and all of a sudden things got really dark. So I turned around and there was a giant cloud of smoke. And my first thought was, oh, there must be a brush fire or a grass fire someplace. So I started checking on social media and saw that there were some reports of a grass fire close to Marshall. We lived in Louisville, south of Harper Lake, so I didn't worry too much because that's, a ways away. And but then we kept seeing clouds of smoke, started seeing more things on social media, started seeing that the fire was moving towards Superior, which is the next town over. And when we saw that Superior was being evacuated, my husband was home, I was home, our youngest son Joel was home, our oldest son Sam was at work. I told my husband, this is weird, but we may have to evacuate. So we didn't really start putting things together, but we started thinking about things a little bit. We took a video of all the rooms in our house. Kind of waited to hear more from emergency, and started checking the emergency website. And so in that time period, I don't know, that was probably about, say, half an hour. And then we heard that we had to evacuate. And so we had about 20 minutes. And then there were law enforcement driving through, and the smoke was just everywhere. And so we grabbed a few things, not many, and our cat, and evacuated.
I noticed you said live and then corrected yourself to lived. Is this transitional period still affecting you and your family? And if so, how? How have you been able to move on or try moving on?
That's a good question. So as far as it being a transition period, well, first of all, we're still trying to figure out what we're going to do. We're either going to sell our lot and move someplace else or rebuild, which seems more likely. But the transition, everything moves more slowly than you might imagine. We're still waiting for our lot to be cleaned up, so it's still basically the same as the way it was right after the fire. We're renting a duplex, and we don't call it home. We call it the landing place because it just feels like a temporary place right now. It feels like just where we're going to be for a while. We've been really fortunate that there's been a lot of community support to help all the families really. I mean, we have the basics of what we need for our furniture and kitchen stuff and clothing. But it doesn't feel like home. So it's both a weird space of looking back on what we lost, but we also have to start making plans for where we're going. And we didn't choose this, so we weren't in any way ready to do any of this. And so there's a lot of balancing. Like there's all of the emotional stuff that comes with losing our house and losing all of the things that we loved and treasured. But then there's the mundane things of, okay, we have to, sign up with FEMA for debris removal. And so there's the pragmatic stuff and the emotional stuff, and you have to jump back and forth.
A lot to juggle.
Yeah.
And Colorado has seen a lot of fires in 2022 so far, from Marshall to NCAR. Experts have said we may be in for an above average fire year. Mm-hmm. How have you and your family prepared for the possibility of more fires?
I don't know that we have thought about more fires specifically, but I'm very aware now of some of the government conversations around wildfire preparedness, around emergency evacuation systems, there's a conversation going on in Colorado right now about the wildlife, kind of wildland urban interface, and how we have to do a better job of that space that's sort of where urban areas join kind of wildlands and grasslands, and that we need to do a much better job of thinking carefully about those kinds of spaces, because that was, clearly a big problem with this fire, that it moved so quickly across the grasslands and then just jumped right into neighborhoods. So,
would you say that your experience with the Marshall Fire and sort of its subsequent fallout has altered your opinion on things around climate change, made you more aware about some of the things that climate change can have an effect on? How would you say it's sort of?
As I think about climate change, we were already, I think, really concerned. I think a lot of people who live in this area are very aware of the concerns of climate change. And certainly we had never, ever anticipated that our quiet little urban neighborhood would go up in flames. I mean, that just seemed completely unreal, and still feels very unreal. So I don't think it's altered my views, but it's made them really deeply personal. And also I do think that areas, especially the American West, we don't have a lot of water. We're going to have a lot of wildfire problems, and we're going to have a lot of water problems. And we should start thinking about urban design differently, landscaping differently. Anything we can do to conserve water is going to be really important. And I think anything that we can do to consider, I've learned a ton about building codes. So there was a big conversation in Louisville about building codes, and thinking about more sustainable building codes, fire-resistant structures. Yeah.
Interesting. One more before we wrap up. Is there anything you'd like to say to others that were impacted by the fire, or that may be worried something like this could happen to them, either living in Colorado or anywhere else that's prone to fire risk?
Oh, yeah, that's a good question. So the things that I have been telling people, if they've asked, so what's your advice? Well, number one, have an evacuation list. Even if you think you don't need one, know exactly what you would grab if you had 20 minutes, and know exactly where it is in your house. Don't worry about stuff that can be replaced. Birth certificates can be replaced, but the drawings that my son's made in 3rd grade can't. And, so those things, so think about your treasures, but also think about participating in something that makes you feel hopeful about the future. So while we are aware that climate change is going to continue to affect our area for a long time, there's no quick change. I think it's important that people become involved in something that they feel hopeful about. Nature conservancy, wildlife preservation, planting a garden, doing some things that make you feel hopeful, and also recognizing the power of collective action, that when a lot of people do make changes, it does make a difference. And I would say pay more attention to local politics, like know what's going on in your community and influence government in the levels that you can. And also appreciate kindness. So when the fire first happened, the first thing that we heard was, okay, file a claim with your insurance and then start making a list. You're going to have to list every single thing in your house for your insurance policy, which is gut-wrenching and awful. Fortunately, we did not have to do that, but we started doing that. And I started a list of just the things that I treasure that I know that we can't replace. But I also started a kindness list because people were incredibly kind and total strangers, who shared food and clothing and our family, our community, our church. And so in the midst of crisis, human beings take care of each other. And so we're grateful for that.
Well, thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, sorry.
It's great to know that you and your family were so well taken care of. And hopefully continue to be through all this.
And actually, Jay was one of the people who came over and brought some music gear and all sorts of stuff, and he's been really kind. So he was one of those people who reached out and helped. So,
well,
all right.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.